You're listening to Switched On Australia, the podcast that tracks the opportunities and challenges of the renewable energy transition and electrifying everything, everywhere. Switched On is proudly brought to you by Boundless Earth. Boundless Earth uses philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world. Switched On is also brought to you by GoodWe, the all-in-one ESA battery system safely powering Aussie homes, lowering bills and providing energy independence. Hello, I'm Anne Delaney. Thanks for joining me on Switched On Australia. When most of us think about the biggest energy users in our homes, we usually think of heaters, electric vehicles or hot water systems. I doubt many of us think about the pool pumps that quietly hum away in suburban backyards. Now that may be because you don't have a pool, fair enough, but around 1.3 million households do, and a pool pump can cost between $600 and $1,200 a year to run, depending on your pool size, filter type and pipework. The Department of Climate and Energy estimates the pump that filters, sanitises and circulates water in pools makes up around 18% of a household's electricity bill. And back in 2019, ARENA found that if Australia's 1.3 million pool pumps all ran at the same time, they could draw as much as 3.7 gigawatts of power. Now that's equivalent to several large power stations. So this isn't a fringe issue. It could be a big untapped opportunity for greater energy efficiency and flexible demand. Because if we reduce pool run times, make sure that they operate in the middle of the day when solar generation is abundant, we could help lower pressure on the grid. But there's a reason why that hasn't happened, as you'll hear in today's interview. Patrick Michel, though, believes his startup, Together Energy, may finally have solved that problem with a device they've called a TED. It combines pool management, energy efficiency and smart scheduling in a way that can reduce pool times, apparently, by 25 to 50%. And that could potentially save households hundreds of dollars a year while also creating a new consumer energy resource for the grid. Patrick Michel, thanks so much for joining the Switched On podcast today.
Thanks, Anne. Very happy to be here.
Patrick, you grew up on the Gold Coast, and which I think I understand is one of the most pool-dense places in the world. But what first made you look at pools through, I suppose, an energy lens rather than simply as something that people swim in?
For a couple of reasons. Many years ago, I built my own pool and spent a lot of time making sure that we designed one that was going to be as efficient as possible, having just done a renovation that also involved, a lot of efficiency and the likes. And that got me to understand how much energy was being used in pools if it wasn't done properly. I then, while I was running an energy efficiency business called What Solutions, I explored pools in more depth, trying to come up with a gizmo to make single speed pool pump, variable speed pool pump. And I didn't end up doing that, but it was a very interesting deep dive into pools and the energy use. And then I took a break for 6 or 7 years. I was involved in another startup which had nothing to do with energy and caught up with my two co-founders of Together Energy, Ross and Kieran, about, I think it was October 2023, after I left the previous startup, just to chew the fat about what was going on the grid and energy, because I've been basically out of the loop for 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I got to understand what was going on with the duck curve as it stood, negative energy prices in the middle of the day, peaking prices in the middle of the evening. And the discussion got onto pools because I just remembered how much energy was wasted and also how discretionary the pool is. It has to run every day, but when it runs is completely up to you. And you'd have to be extremely optimized for it to make a difference when you run it. As long as you got your X hours per day, you could shift that quite easily. So
How much? But tell me, how much energy does a pool take?
So most people will follow the rule of thumb that the pool shop will have given them. And a typical pool shop will say something like 8 to 12 hours in summer and 6 to 8 hours in winter. Now, the pool shop is very well intentioned, but they don't know your pool. So
Mm.
your pool is different from your neighbor's pool. It's in the same area, but yours might be bigger or smaller. Your chlorinator might be older or newer. You might have a sand filter versus another type of filter. So those rules of thumbs are just that. So at 8 to 12 hours in summer, I run mine, which is a large pool, 3.5 hours in January, and now it's already down to 1 hour a day. So significant is the amount. It depends for each pool is the right answer. The old it depends, but usually more than 25% for almost everybody. Very easily 50% for most people. You can save that.
And roughly what would that be costing people that using their pool for those higher hours?
About so a typical pool pump is a 880 or 900 watt motor. Chlorinator is about 250 watts. So give it 1.1 kilowatt, the same as a kettle. So if you're running a kettle 8 to 12 hours a day and you're paying electricity bills, you'd be, telling the kids to stop using their kettle. And yet that's what we do with pools. Most people run them for 8 to 12 hours as if they were running the kettle for that long. And that costs, usually, if you take about 38 cents or 35 cents a kilowatt hour, that will end up being $1,200 to $1,300 a year.
Wow, that's significant. And it's actually not a fringe issue, is it? Because I understand that something like 1.3 million pools are here in Australia.
So if you do the sums, 1.3 million pools running every day, 8 to 12 hours in summer. It's a significant load. It's probably close to, if you just back of the fag pack calculations,
Mm.
it's somewhere around 2% of the energy we use in Australia. For houses with a pool, it's if you don't have air conditioning, it's by far the largest appliance in the house. If you have air conditioning, they can fight each other for number one spot or number two spot, but it's a big load and it doesn't have to be. That's the main thing. The opportunity is there for 25 to 50% savings.
Most people wouldn't be aware of that, would they, Patrick?
No, it's the head in the sand syndrome with the pool. It's a bit like going to the mechanic, or when you hear that sound in the car, you just prefer to hope it goes away, and then eventually the bill arrives. But the bill is also hidden in your electricity bill. So is it
Mm.
the fridge? Is it the heaters? Is it whatever? But the pool is a chunky part of that.
So tell me, what did you decide to do with these particular insights about pool pumps?
Well, our original idea was based on the grid and try and load shifting and demand response. So, can we shift when pools operate, or can we turn off pools in events of grid stress? And the answer was yes, obviously you can. But the problem was always that you need to get those devices into people's homes and you need people to love them in the first instance. Otherwise, they're not going to use them. Um, you know, Getting off-peak hot water installed took a long time all over Queensland. The dread devices for air conditioning were very, very hard to get people to take on. So you need to develop something that people want. So we had to first look at the pool pain points, and people love their pools. People love the way their pools look, and they're prepared to actually dig their head in the sand for the cost simply because they want it to be there and look fantastic. But they know they have three problems. They know it costs a lot, but they're reluctant to reduce the hours because no one wants a green pool, and the pool shop said 8 to 12 hours, and I don't know anything about it. So that reluctance to reduce the hours and the unknown is problem number one. Problem number two is water chemistry. For some reason, well, to start with, it's not easy. You need to balance quite a lot of things. But secondly, I don't think the industry makes it easy by how it explains how to do it and the names of the chemicals. Some people call something buffer, someone calls it pH increases, someone calls it sunscreen, someone calls it CY. It's very confusing. And most people didn't like chemistry at school, and they're not about to learn chemistry again as adults with a pool. So they either outsource it or they just do the usual sort of add chlorine or add something every now and then and go to the pool shop.
Yes, we do that.
And it costs money when you go to the pool shop because you've let it go. So I like to sort of the analogy I like using for water chemistry is like if you sleep well, if you eat well, if you exercise, your immune system is strong and can respond to anything. If on the other hand, any one of those is out of whack, then the minute you get exposed to something bad, things gurgler very quickly. And so that's the same with water chemistry. If everything is perfectly balanced, you can throw a storm, you can throw dogs and a big party and lots of kids at your pool and it will be fine. But if, on the other hand, it's at the edge and all of a sudden something bad happens, it'll go green. And once it goes green, it's a nightmare. So if people are just, there's a lot of unknown about the water chemistry. They don't know what to do. They rely on the pool shop. When they go to the pool shop and he or she says, you need this, and that, $300, people are sort of, it's a bit like the mechanic. Really? Do I really need that? And so there's this constant head in the sand issue that we'd like to fix for pool owners.
So it's fundamentally been pool chemistry which has held other companies, other inventors, other entrepreneurs back from developing something. Is it
Yeah.
fundamentally the pool chemistry?
That reluctance to play around with a very valued asset, your pool, something that people are proud of, reducing the hours is not the answer straight away. You
Mm,
need, and I don't want to, there's an hour's worth of conversation about water chemistry, but basically chlorine can work extremely well as your sanitizer. And the chlorine is what everyone has, whether they have a mineral pool, a salt pool, or a chlorinated pool, chlorine is the sanitizer. And it works extremely well in the right conditions. At the right pH, alkalinity, with the right amount of sunscreen, chlorine needs only a few grams per day to keep up with the load, the bacterial load. But when those things are out of whack, you might need 3, 4, 5 times as much chlorine just to keep the algae at bay. So getting the right water chemistry is what's really important for your chlorine to work effectively. And people don't want to learn all that. So we wanted to make it easy and basically make it automatic. You dip a test strip, you get the result, and TED tells you what to do to get your water chemistry right. So then after that, you can start reducing the hours. And there was one third pain point that people also needed to address, and that was the pool timer.
right.
Pool timers are just fidgety devices with, some of them are mechanical, with the little knobbly things that go in and out. You're not sure whether outside is on or off, and people get quite confused. And every time something happens, the timer gets out of whack. Or there's some chlorinators have got those electronic ones where you have to press for 2 seconds and up and down and start time and end time, and people get lost on those as well because they only change them occasionally. So, I think best practice in Australia is I have a summertime and a winter time.
Right.
Most people is, I don't know, it just runs. But, it's where the spiders live. It's difficult to play around with. So, whereas with TED, what we've developed is the ability to say, well, in January it's 10 hours, but in February it'll probably be 9, and then jump down to 7 and 5 and 2 and 1, 1, 2, 4, 5, and you do it from your phone. So that's one of the simplifications about addressing that third pain point is, I know it's expensive, I don't know much about the chemistry, and in any instance, I don't want to get up in the morning and go under the house and change the time.
So how does it work? And you're calling it TED. How did you come up with TED as a name?
Well, going backwards, because the company is called Together Energy, you can call it the Together Energy device, but actually that's not that's not how it came about. We wanted a friendly assistant, name that wasn't too long. So it was one of those brain farts. We came up with TED, and then it just worked out that it could
Or
also be,
somebody's uncle's name or your grandfather's?
look, it's Bob or Ted or Bill, whatever.
Something friendly.
Something friendly that people don't tend to be offended with. And TED is effectively a smart plug that ends up being your switch connected to an app. So that's the pair of devices. And then there's also test strips that come with the device. But it's a Wi-Fi connected smart plug that replaces your chlorinator's timer and becomes the new timer for your pool. And all of the smarts end up being on your app on your phone.
And so what do? You plug it in and what else? How does it work?
Yeah. So in the first place, we get TED connected to your home Wi-Fi. Then we go down to where the pool is, and um, your chlorinator usually has the timer built in. So you set that to manual or always on. So the chlorinator's timer is no longer the timer, and you plug your chlorinator into TED. So pool pump is always plugged into the chlorinator, and the chlorinator has a timer and is plugged into the wall. We remove the chlorinator's timer and we plug the chlorinator into TED. And then it just waits for the signal to go on and off based on its schedule.
Right. Now, this isn't just about saving money for consumers, is it? I mean, you kind of mentioned it at the beginning in terms of why you set up this company. You've also described pools as a kind of distributed pseudo snowy 2.0. Now, that's a very bold claim. Tell me what you mean by that.
If you have 1.3 million pools in Australia and you can shift when they operate, you're effectively achieving the same as a battery because you're managing the load and the grid load to be using these devices in the middle of the day as opposed to in evening hours. Obviously, it's slightly different to energy storage, but the end outcome is, if we're trying to flatten that duck curve, i.e., make sure that the demand matches the supply and the surge of supply of solar and wind in the middle of the day, then we can use, because all the TED devices are grid connected, we can work with energy retailers or energy distributors to help balance the grid with pools. Now, obviously, it's not 10 pools that you need. You need a lot of pools to make a difference. But the second part is we've helped a pool owner save energy via energy efficiency, reducing the hours. But now we can help them also balance the grid, and maybe through an incentive from the energy retailer or the distributor, take part in load shifting or demand response events. So that's slightly separate. We've got less chemistry cost, less energy use, and then perhaps some incentives from your energy retailer and or distributor to participate in load shifting and demand response.
So it's kind of like a virtual power plant for pools?
Yeah. It's look. Any good virtual power plant needs to be able to orchestrate loads in the home if they're going to be useful. So, if you have a battery, if you have solar, solar is great to run your pool in the middle of the day, but if it's raining, then you actually run, and you've got time of use tariff, you'll be running your pool in the most expensive part of the day. So, if you could run your pool in the middle of the day when it's sunny, but automatically shift it to the off peak at night when it's raining, then you'll be optimizing your schedule, and that's what we want to do, and that's what we do with TED, which is to say, hey, Anne, you live in the middle of blah, and it's going to be raining for the next 3 days. Shall we shift the pool to the evening? And you go to the nighttime. Yes, okay. And it automatically does that. And when the sun comes back, it automatically brings it back to the middle of the day.
So, as we know, virtual power plants haven't been a massive draw card for a lot of Australians. There's a lot of suspicion about retailers. People don't trust them. They want to basically, maintain control of their devices for their own households. How are you going to get over that issue?
Yes, there is a lack of trust in people shifting loads in your house without you knowing what's happening. And we've decided to overcome that very specifically by ensuring that all TED decisions are opt-in. So TED will make suggestions and you'll say, okay. It may be that in a year's time, you go back in your settings and say, let TED do it automatically. I trust you now. All your recommendations are good. But in the first instance, should we increase your schedule? Should we reduce your schedule? Can we change it to nighttime? Would you like to participate in the demand response event? Always requires an okay. So you know what it's trying to do, you know what it's trying to achieve, and it's definitely not costing you more money because your energy retailers want it to do that.
Now, if a significant proportion of Australia's 1.3 million pools were orchestrated in this way, how meaningful could that be for the grid?
It would be one of the tools that's required. And that's when you're a bit of an energy nerd, after a while, you realize there's not one solution for everything, whether it's nuclear power plants or solar. It can be very meaningful. If you look at 1.3 million times 1.1 kilowatt, you're dealing with 1.4 gigawatt. They're not all on at the same time, but you can pretty much guarantee that at 2:00 in the afternoon in summer, most pools are on. So if, a transmission line between South Australia and Victoria goes down at that particular time and you actually decide to do something about it using something like TED, it can be a meaningful difference because it's a large load.
Mm.
And it's the load that people don't mind. If it's really, really hot, you don't want your air conditioner to go off. Um, and if you want your kettle, you want your kettle to work. And in any instance, we can't control kettles. So, it's the one event, it's the one device that if you got the right participation incentive, you said, yes, I'm agreeing to this, to take part in this. And then you got an SMS saying your pool was turned off from 2 to 4 today to help balance the grid. You'd be fine with it. In fact, you'd probably be feeling you're doing your bit.
Well, yes, hopefully. My guest today on Switched On Australia is Patrick Michel, the co-founder and CEO of Together Energy. And we're talking about the potential for 1.3 million Australian pool pumps to reduce their energy use and help take pressure off the grid. And we'll be back right after this break.
G'day, Alex Carey here, proud ambassador for GoodWe. The GoodWe ESA 3060 all-in-one commercial solution is available now from GoodWe wholesalers. With a massive 50 kilowatt hours of the battery eligible for the federal rebate, it's the perfect solution for small businesses. The commercial energy storage range from GoodWe is growing, with more models launching soon. Visit goodwe.com.au for more information or contact the local GoodWe team.
Now, I did do a little bit of digging. In 2018, ARENA, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, funded a trial by, what they call Pooled Energy, which aimed to aggregate swimming pools as a demand response resource. And it seems like the concept was very similar to yours. You optimise the pool operation, you reduce the household bills, and then you shift those pool loads away from periods of peak demand. And ARENA said at the time, if all the pools were on at once, they would use up to 3.7 gigawatts of energy. Now, that's a staggering figure, equivalent, I'm pretty sure, to multiple large power stations.
Yep.
What happened with that? That was back in 2018. What has happened that, in the interim that we're here now, and a lot of people still don't know that pool pumps could be used in this way?
Pooled Energy was the first company to start looking at pools from an energy perspective. But unfortunately, they went broke in 2021, I think, during COVID. And we've tried to address some of the reasons why that happened. So Pooled Energy required a large upfront equipment purchase.
Mm-hmm.
They were an energy retailer, which we all know, unless you're extremely, extremely large, can be a dangerous game.
Yes.
And they also changed your pool chemistry in such a way that you needed different chemicals that you had to purchase from them. And I think all three of those things made, were rods for their own back. So a large upfront cost, not always easy, whereas we're trying to play the retrofit game. Self-install, 10 minutes, $150. Energy retailer, we see the energy retailers as partners going forward for distribution, not as someone we want to become. It's way too complicated. We're a small company and we want to stay small and play what we're good at. But playing around in wholesale electricity market every 5 minutes is not something we're interested in taking part in. We want to work with the energy retailers and distributors, not in parallel. And then changing the pool chemistry. They were using, I think it was bromine at the time, a different sanitizer to chlorine. It is easy, but you needed to purchase your chemicals from Pooled Energy. And I think I heard a lot of people say maybe that wasn't something that they were really happy to do. So I think that's what happened. Certainly the conclusion, the ARENA interest and conclusion were correct. But, in order to make this work, you need broad adoption. And in order to broad adoption, you can't go around looking for the Killara homes where a $150,000 pool can do with another $1,000 piece of equipment. You need to look after where the pools really are. And the pools are in Southeast Queensland. They're in Australian suburbia. And they're with, households that have your normal 40,000 litre pool and don't want to spend 2,000 or 3,000 and change their energy retail contract. just to save a few bucks.
Now, you've obviously learned from that experience, from previous people moving into this space. So what about internationally? Because I understand in places like Florida, they've been using demand response programs. Are you aware of any other international examples of where it may have been a bit more successful?
No, so look, obviously Australia is the most penetrated pool
Well,
market in the
yes.
world in terms of residential pools. Florida, California, the desert states, and Nevada, New Mexico have a lot of pools as well. Are the others? Um, I know that in California, new pool pumps need to be variable speed pool pumps. We haven't mandated that.
Hmm.
But that just reduces the overall wattage of the pool, but it doesn't reduce the hours and make them more efficient. It's basically you're giving someone something that save them on energy, but doesn't necessarily do what we're trying to do. So even though I have a variable speed pool pump, I use TED all the time because it still makes exactly the same difference, just on a smaller scale. But because it's a plug-in device that doesn't have its own circuit, it's very hard to do things at scale without a sort of retrofit solution like ours. So no, I'm not. There isn't a TED equivalent that we can tell anywhere, and I think it's because the pool industry doesn't really understand the energy space, and the energy industry doesn't really understand the water chemistry aspect, and so never the twains have met. And it's basically because I like pools and I'm an energy nerd that my two co-founders and I have kind of went, hang on, why hasn't anyone done this?
You now have an opportunity to run a trial with Energex across southeast Queensland. This is southeast Queensland electricity distributor. Tell me, where is that trial up to?
So we've finished enrollment, and we're about to start a year-long trial where we expect about up to 9 events. The night before, we'll get a request from the distributor to ensure that as many of the pools enrolled in the trial as possible do go on between 12 and 2 or go off between 4 and 6, and we'll then report on compliance, how many people participated, how many people chose to override and not participate, etc. The idea is we may also be asked to only look at a subset. So an energy distributor, as opposed to a retailer, might be looking to protect one street or one town or one region or the whole state. And so the ability for us to target which pools are being asked to participate in a trial is something else that we want to demonstrate. And that's really interesting because, we've been talking about the size of pools relative to the whole of Australia, but the distributor might not be interested if they're dealing with the Sunshine Coast. They're not really interested with what's happening in Southport on the Gold Coast, but they really want to save this transformer or capex for this area by effectively managing 2 or 3 times a year to avoid, that ultra peak.
And did they approach you or did you approach them?
Trade secrets and whatever. I approached them at one of those energy conferences where I happened to sit right next to the right person. And went, oh, okay, we should chat.
Okay. And I can understand why they would be interested in pool pumps if as you say, that there's the potential savings there in so many regards.
So the distributor is all about capex, and it's all about meeting their requirements to provide, electricity 24/7. So they're not interested in the energy efficiency aspect of what we do. Simply the ability to avoid things blowing up and delay future capex. So if the whole of Southport on the Gold Coast is about to blow, and we need to spend $12 million to fix that, or if we can delay that by 4 years because we're managing to avoid those 4 or 5 events a year of 1 or 2 hours where the thing's about to blow, that's really the area of interest. And by the way, I have no idea whether 12 million or $12,000 is what we're talking about, but delaying capex.
Yes, yes. Tell me, what about public pools? We've been talking about residential pools, but obviously the public pools use a lot more energy. Are you hoping to bring them into the picture?
It's a two-part answer. No, for most public pools will run 24/7. They have ozone generators, and ozone works by killing the germs as they pass through the pipe,
Right.
so it doesn't stay in the water. So I don't really want to get involved in learning all about this, health and safety, and every council will have different rules for the local public pools. So no, not interested. But what's really interesting is the resorts. So we have a distributor in Southeast Asia who's actually targeting the multi-pool resorts. So I don't know if you're familiar with these holidays in Bali or Phuket or Koh Samui, where
Never been on one.
resorts have 40 villas and 40 pools.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes they're run by diesel generators, and the timers on the pool are completely, when she goes, she goes. And so you could end up saving a huge amount of energy simply by making sure that the pools aren't all on at once,
Yeah.
for example.
Yes.
That, the vacancy versus the not vacant hours of operation are different and can be controlled from the desk of the operations manager in the office, not by having a pool person go and, switch things on and off. So we're seeing a lot of interest there, and we're starting with Bali, and that's actually looking very good. But it's not the public pool. It's sort of somewhere in between, the hospitality business.
Do you see pools becoming another consumer energy resource alongside solar batteries, hot water systems, and vehicle to grid?
I think when VPP operators gain back the trust, and people want to orchestrate as many devices as possible in their homes, air conditioning is often a no-no. Basically, I want it on when I want it on. And so, yes, obviously with the EV, it becomes, and the hot water, it becomes one of those really interesting assets to be able to manage demand in the home.
Now, just a final question, if we're talking again in 5 years' time, what would success look like for you? Obviously, you're a business. You want to create a successful business with this product that you've developed. But what else do you see ahead?
Look, happy customers to start with. So the more consumers are using TED for running their own pools, the more we can have an impact on the grid. So rolling, we're currently only in Southeast Queensland, but learning our lessons in Southeast Queensland to market TED to the whole of Queensland and the whole of Australia, so that we get a good penetration of pools to make a difference. That's success story number one. I think making a difference in the resort area all over Southeast Asia, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of villas with pools, would be really interesting, because effectively, it'd be fun to do due diligence on each new customer as well, spending a week in the resorts. So that would be success story number two. No, the US is an interesting market we haven't touched yet. California is 1.8 million. I think in total there's 10.4 million pools in the US. Even though all of the pool companies are effectively US or European based, and there's only 2 or 3 pool conglomerates, it hasn't been tackled for the reasons we talked about before. It's a retrofit installation. There'll be lots of technical issues and differences between the US and Australia as to what needs to be addressed. And they don't use chlorinators and salt water as much as we do, but tackling that would be very exciting. And then possibly looking at, can we apply what we've learned in the cloud-based, there's an element of AI where we learn your pool. Can we effectively add that to other appliances in the home? So that's a separate story, and we've decided to first and foremost just focus on the pool.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Potentially hundreds of thousands of optimised pools.
I hope so.
Patrick Michel, thanks so much for joining the Switched On podcast today.
Thanks, Anne.
And Patrick Michel is the co-founder and CEO of Together Energy, the maker of TED. You can find out more about the TED on the Together Energy website. That's all we have time for today. Don't forget to like us or send us a comment or review on your favourite podcast platform. I'm Anne Delaney, and I'll see you next time. Switched On Australia was proudly brought to you by GoodWe. GoodWe's all-in-one ESA home battery helps Australians store more of their own solar energy and rely less on the grid. With strong local support and technology already trusted in thousands of homes, GoodWe is making the switch to electrification simpler and more affordable. GoodWe is proud to work with Australian cricketer and GoodWe ambassador Alex Carey. Find out more at goodwe.com.au. Switched On Australia is also proudly brought to you by Boundless Earth. Boundless Earth uses philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world.